Hello, I'm Justin. This is Kellen. Welcome to the Fizz. Kellen, what's been happening in the news cycle for you this week?
I mean, lots going on.
As per the usual.
As per usual. I think that Anthropic's kind of been in the news as well as Google. I think the two, the big one is how do you say Carpathy?
I think so. Carpathy, yeah.
Is join Anthropic. Not sure. It's like on the research team or the engineering team. Not sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a specific announcement yet.
There's always like these big leadership changes. Yeah. It's hard to read into them entirely, but they do signal kind of directional, like sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
And right now it does seem like, with the lawsuits and stuff that like OpenAI is kind of like, I don't want to call them the bad guy, but like kind of in that, they're, human beings, they like to put a good guy and a bad guy, right? Mm-hmm. Even though the reality is that there's some truth to both usually.
Yeah.
But right now it does seem like Anthropic is taking some wins and on kind of a buying spree.
Yeah.
And I think both of them are trying to send a message pre-IPO to kind of get that, it's like a market play. But yeah, so they bought Stainless, which basically like converts like API docs to like MCP protocols and CLIs and things like that, which is into like a secure kind of extensible way. And like, just like Anthropic was one of like the founding members of the MCP kind of movement, if you will.
Right.
I think it aligns pretty well with their MO.
Yeah.
So it's 300 million. That's a lot. I don't know. It just seems like everything's purchased at a premium in that space at this point, but maybe they're worth it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear more about Karpathy and what he's going to be doing at Anthropic. He's probably most famous tweet ever is the introduction of the term vibe coding.
Right.
And had like no idea that would just become a big thing and topic.
I think this leads into something that we've been talking about, which is like Google, Microsoft, Apple, these like monolith technology companies, with Google aside, don't have frontier models. They don't have like an AI specific entity.
Mm-hmm.
They're like AI powered or AI injected, whereas Anthropic and OpenAI, they are AI companies.
Right.
Google has obviously many years with the research, deep mind research and all that kind of stuff for like a decade or more. And they have Geminis from like a product perspective. And Microsoft has like some models, but like I bet people don't know that. And they certainly don't compete with like Opus or like a GPT 5.5 or something like that. They don't compete. So it's interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I saw there's been some academic attention on performance of models inside and outside of their own agentic harnesses. So the short version of this is, let's take an Anthropic model. So Opus 4.7, let's say if we just communicated with that very directly, like through an API or some other mechanism, that is likely to not perform as well as Opus will perform inside of Claude Code or Claude.ai.
Right.
And the takeaway from this is, and that's because Anthropic, because they own the model and they can own all of the tool sets around that model, they can further engineer and enhance the user experience to get it where they want to. And I think that idea competes a little bit with something like that Microsoft says, or maybe even just general advice is, use different models for different things, explore. And I think there's a certain amount of value in that and understanding what ChatGPT is like, what Opus is like, or even like what Opus is like compared to Haiku. And we've talked about why you would use a different model for different reasons. But I think, and even the acquisition of Stainless, which is big into the apparatus, the harness stuff, SDKs, CLIs, the MCPs, is winning the hearts and minds of users is about the complete experience. It's not just about the model. And I think that's what's actually somewhat interesting about Google in terms of just something to be curious about and pay attention to, is compared to their traditional peers, they at least have the full picture. They have a frontier model. I think it's probably ranked number 3 behind Anthropic and OpenAI usually, but it's up there. It's like within a margin of error. They have an application stack, the Google Workspace. They have Android on, the second most popular OS for mobile devices, even though Apple just dominates that market share still.
Yep.
They have cloud computing services. They have all these things. So they have all the ingredients to keep investing in the apparatus around their AI in a way that like a Microsoft or a Meta, I think Meta's kind of giving up is what it kind of sounds
Yeah.
like. Apple hasn't gone there yet. Sounds like they're inking deals with all these and Google just came out yesterday. They had a big feature release about all kinds of new stuff with Gemini that I'm still digesting. And I think that's probably what's going to start to differentiate and create some separation in these players is who builds around the model the best, right? And I've said it before on the show. People will start to say, we are an Anthropic shop. We are an OpenAI shop. Just like in our past career experiences, we're a Microsoft shop. We're an AWS shop. Like I think that's inevitable. I don't think the idea that like, oh yeah, we bought between ChatGPT and Opus for different things I don't think that's a sustainable, that might be happening for a while still, but I think eventually that's not where we end up.
Yeah. So we definitely hear, maybe not all the time, but certainly enough weekly that some companies are like, no, we can't use Claude Code or we can't use Codex, or it's like all these kind of constraints, and they may be for good reason, but kind of hard to hear. But like, for us, like who have a secure environment, basically admins in our environment, we can see the full potential of what these things can do. And then we go to like a prospect or a client and we're kind of like, I don't know, meant to kind of work with our hands tied behind our back, right? Like we can't use tools or, that's tough from an adoption perspective, know, and like compliance and governance and stuff like that tend to lag behind innovation. So, it's the agentic harness. I completely agree is the thing at the moment. The models have not improved so much that like the harness is not the most important thing. So,
yeah. And just to like piggyback on kind of what you hear from clients and prospects right now, this was a direct quote from someone I had a meeting with a few days ago. Well, our technical team or lead says that Microsoft is committed to security and Anthropic is not. That was the reasoning of not having Claude in their environment. And I was just like, I'd love to talk to that person, right? Like I want to understand the analysis that leads you to Anthropic's not committed to security. I think it's probably something closer, like you just haven't figured out what's involved for you to feel like you understand what's happening if you bring that into your world. And you've been using Microsoft forever. So it's sort of like an easy, I feel safe. It's sort of like it's better to not make a new decision than it is to do something new. But I think that's this dilemma that we run into with clients and prospects. We work with them, we find a way. Just because you have Opus 4.7 or Sonnet or whatever model we think is best for the thing we're trying to do, available via Azure or AWS Bedrock, that doesn't mean it's coming with the harness that makes working with that model really, really effective.
Right.
And so that can create some of the limitations when especially you're trying to use AI either to build something or to inject it into a workflow. They're different. And it's very nuanced and weird science type stuff. I think, my takeaway here is like, if you're in on this stuff as a company, and maybe if you haven't even gotten there yet, I don't really care one way or the other, but you should probably be thinking about which system do we feel like fits our needs the best, and just go deep on that. I don't care if it's Codex or Claude Code or like fully commit, because I don't think the patchwork plan is going to be the best option. I don't think it's probably going to be an option that's available forever.
Yeah.
Anthropic's already doing this. They're separating their billing models for what goes in your subscription and what has to be pay as you go. And sure, yeah, you can wire up an open source model and you can do all those things, but that open source model they didn't build the harness for the open source model. They built the harness for their model.
Yeah.
So be ready to invest in some tinkering on your own. So, but yeah, I'm really interested to keep paying attention to what Google's doing, because I think they're in an interesting position, more so relative to their traditional peers than Anthropic and OpenAI. But they have all the ingredients to do well, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, so kind of timely on the news cycle topics for what's inside the bottle today is our own adventures in building something that resembles a harness around AI. I think maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, we introduced our Pathfinder method, and we did kind of a walkthrough of what that methodology is like. And we've been building like crazy. So this thing is going to be releasing pretty soon. Everything from an individual option all the way up to full team support. We're really excited about it. And one of the things we've had to do in this process is build a harness around an AI guided experience in our tooling that was reliable but creative. Again, balancing that determinism versus inference balance or mixture, turns out really difficult. So I thought it'd be really interesting to discuss and kind of walk people through what does that actually mean in terms of the technical implementation of this. And just, you've been doing so much work on this the last week or so, some of the frustrations, lessons learned, breakthrough moments that we've had getting this thing to a really stable place. Big milestone for us. I was with a client yesterday and we walked through it and it worked really well and they were super excited about it. So like my heart was like, right. So it was cool. But yeah, I think this is relevant for anyone that's trying to build any sort of tool, whether it's for your own personal use or something you want to go to market with or something you want to build inside of your company where conversational AI is involved and you want some sort of reliable experience to happen. So let's have a look, shall we?
We shall.
All right. So in traditional The Fizz form, we have visual aids. Claude this morning, I was like, hey, I'm going to talk about this today. Like, I need a visual aid. And it delivered. I'll walk through this. We'll put this up. You'll be able to kind of check it out on our website too, as well as the method for Pathfinder. Something we learned early on working with AI, even before we started Tiny Bottle, is the AI itself, kind of what we're talking about with some of the news that we've been following. The LLM itself is never the full picture. Like it takes a lot of things around the LLM to deliver a good experience. And so our system in our Pathfinder application, it relies on all these things for it to work well. You're never going to succeed creating a tailored experience or a targeted outcome by just like wiring up a model with an API and say like, here, just chat with this thing. It won't figure it out. And you'll be on LinkedIn because people are like, hey, we figured out how to jailbreak the Chipotle chatbot. And now I can help you with Python code. So I'll walk through this. So we've got really kind of 7 key concepts that exist in our application technically. So this isn't going to be about kind of the Pathfinder system in terms of the methodology. This is like the actual technical implementation of how we made this guided conversation work. And so let's just rip through it, man. So the first thing that's really important is this concept of the state machine. And so to explain that really simply, we're not expecting the LLM to maintain its own awareness about where it is in the Pathfinder process. It's not going to do that well. It's going to hallucinate a lot. It's going to deviate. It's going to use the wrong terminology at different points. And so we have to have a component in our architecture that is in charge of understanding where a user is in our user journey in that process, and then telling the model what it should do based on where it's at. So I think as a core design consideration, if you're building something like this, is don't just send a prompt to an LLM that says, this is the process step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and here's what you should do. Like if you want that to work well, you need to have something that's sort of acting as the boss. And in our case, that's the state machine. And that is kind of conducting that traffic. But this was a really tricky part of this whole process to get this really dialed. I don't know, Kellen, you've done so much work on this last few days. Kind of what's been some of your painful memories or your positive memories, one way or the other from it?
Yeah, it's been a fun challenge, but I mean, I echo everything you just said. Like, it's very difficult to try to replicate what a harness does. I mean, you think about it, like these companies spend millions of dollars building these harnesses, and it's easy to assume, oh, it's all the model. It's not. Controlling the flow and kind of mechanism in which the model is leveraged is actually the really impressive part. So we don't like handle any problem kind of a flow. So that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But we have a very specific set of flow that we're trying to bring a user through to kind of make it easy to understand where your AI priority should be. And to do that, we do need some questions to be answered in some
Right.
way. And the models themselves sometimes either think that the question's been answered, and
Right.
maybe it's not, or like they really want the question answered and will just beat the user to death trying to get it out of
Yeah.
them. And so you don't want either of those. So like the real challenge with building up like some workflows is that, just like you said, the deterministic versus like kind of inference or non-deterministic
Mhm.
is the real challenge here, because when you're dealing with LLMs, they're not very deterministic. So the challenge has really been like, depending on the kind of question, how deterministic or open ended can it be?
Right.
I think it's the real challenge. And
Mm.
then finding the balance between code based
Mm-hmm.
determination and prompt based inference.
Yes. Yes.
And finding that balance is hopefully why we're able to charge what we can charge.
Right. Right. Right.
It's
Right.
not, I mean, it's been a lot of work. It's not done, but it's like it's 95%, I think, to the way to ship. But it's like, if anyways, what do you, that's my main thing.
Yeah, we're in the final 20% slog of like
Hmm.
dialing it in. But yeah, I just can't emphasize this enough that if you are building something that needs to follow a process or a decision tree that is like this is we advertise this as a dead simple 5-step methodology. It's not like we have
Hmm.
100 branching flows. Like this was still really important. If you're expecting the LLM to maintain its own awareness about where it is and what it should do next,
Hmm.
that you will struggle with that. I promise you. So
Oh.
something like this is really important. The other thing we had to build here is this thing we call a turn contract. So we want our users to have a very easy to understand, easy to interact with, easy to engage experience. I've had experiences just using off the shelf AI or even Cloud Code where it just hits me with so much information all at once. I'm like, oh
Hmm.
my God, I'm overwhelmed. Like, you asked me 4 questions and like didn't give me a chance to answer all of them, and now I'm confused. So this is a case where we're enforcing really strict contracts in our prompting that goes out to the model of things like, hey, don't ask more than one question at a time, keep it concise, and this gets spelled off throughout the entire experience so that the user, again, we want them to be able to participate. And if the AI is too intense or it's too vague or it's too redundant, people are going to go away, right? They're not going to
Hmm.
finish the process. And so even me as someone building this with you, like when I was testing it, there was times as we were refining all this, I'm exhausted. You're exhausting me, AI. Like can't do that. So the state machine is in charge of like where we are, and then we have this very strict contract with the LLMs that keeps everything kind of in check throughout the contract. This was tricky too, because the LLMs, they can kind of decide, do they want to follow the rules exactly or not? But this is something that really improve the experience by enforcing these kind of simple rules throughout the whole process.
Yeah, I'd add one thing, which is like, and I don't think this is really giving anything away. It's just, it's something to think about as an AI builder or something, is trying to bring it to the human level. So like,
Hmm.
because that's basically what LLMs are attempting to do, is like be, a quasi human.
Hmm.
That's why there's, not very determinist. People are
Right.
complicated. So in this case, every question that we're trying to receive an answer for is in itself a scale between inference and determinism. So like one question might be like, yeah, we don't really need to be answered even sometimes, or like
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be exact. It can be kind of rough. It
Hmm.
doesn't need to be a date, whatever, right? And in some other cases, like, no, there's only one right answer to this, and it has to be answered. Otherwise, things can't progress. And so you can't even do it at the section level. It
Right.
has to almost be done at the question level.
Yes.
And because that's actually, if you think about it, where the decision really is important. Like, is this question, how important is this question to the overall flow, as well as how
Hmm.
important is it that it's very specific?
Yes.
So, something to think about.
Yeah. Agree. And so this is where I think things get interesting in our process when we get to the third layer here. So Pathfinder is built on top of this dead simple methodology that we've built through our own experiences as consultants and technology people. And if you think about how you would work with a consultant or an expert on anything. Like they would ask you questions and you would answer questions and they would take notes and they'd keep asking you questions to sort of get a sense of what you're trying to do. And then they'd start diagnosing what the best path forward is. So a similar challenge for us is, well, we don't want the LLM, we don't want to rely on the LLM to remember everything that it's talking to the user about. That would go
Mhm.
haywire also because the context gets bigger and bigger and bigger throughout the session. And so we actually have kind of two audiences in our flow, at least what the AI is responding to. So one is the user. So the AI is responding to the user, but then we're also having the AI respond and write things to a database. So Kellen, you were just talking about like, well, there's questions we want to ask to try and understand enough about the user and their team and their business to start diagnosing where AI makes a lot of sense for them and then exactly what they should consider building or doing about it.
Mhm.
So in that process, we have essentially a target schema throughout this process. This is just a very simplified example of it where as the user's providing input, instead of relying on the LLM to kind of keep that all in its brain, it's literally writing the notes down to the database. And
Mhm.
so now this becomes sort of a mechanical record of what is going on in this conversation that we're going to refer to later on. And this is a good representation of probably some of my most important learnings with AI. Because early in my use of AI, like I would just compress all of this into like a prompt or a skill file or something, and then just like hope that the AI like brings it all together in the end.
Yep.
It just simply cannot do that in this type of experience. If
Mhm.
you're a user of this app, you might get through the first couple sections and then you got to go to a meeting. You're coming back later. You might have shut it down and you're logging back in and rehydrating a session. So this was a really important concept for us, but we don't need the user to feel like they're filling out a form. We want this very natural, very conversational. And we don't want them to have to think about the schema we're trying to populate at all.
Mhm.
We just want them to think about themselves and their team and their business and just talk naturally about it and let the system do the heavy lifting. Boy, man, we wrestled with this thing, I feels like, for a while to really get it dialed in of like pulling the right stuff, putting in the right places, referring to it again. It's really impressive that how well it works at this point. Now this one is cool. This is kind of in the QA realm, and you did a ton of work on this. Is we can't just if you want a guided, tailored, high quality user experience, you can't just treat this like ChatGPT where you just talk back and forth, right? And so
Mhm.
not only is the AI, writing things to the database, but there's also that state machine the first layer in combination of some other stuff is constantly doing QA on what the AI is writing back to the user. So like making sure it's not sending like a blank message or it's not asking a question that's already been answered, or it's sometimes the AI will generate two questions and this thing will say like, hey, no, you asked two questions, try again. And so we had to build almost this, I forget exactly what you called it or the technical term, but like essentially this AI buffer for the AI so
Yeah.
that what makes it to the chat is what we want to make it to the chat.
Well, not to tell the secret sauce or whatever, but like, yeah, there's let's call it quality evaluators,
Hmm.
as well as like pre and post guards. Like they are baked into harnesses today. Like
Hmm.
unquestionably, they're happening right now. That
Right.
whenever you see Claude or Codex go into like thinking
Hmm.
tomfoolery or whatever thing they're putting in that, like that's what's happening. They're hitting
Yeah.
the pre and post guards, their version of it
Hmm.
that is probably far more impressive than ours,
Right.
but they're multi-billion dollar entities. So I'd hope they would be.
Yeah.
You know, ours are meant to solve a very specific question, which you'd think would make it easier. And maybe it does in some ways, but like you'd be surprised how much chaos is involved in trying to wrangle an LLM. And it has a lot of power, but it
Right.
also has a lot of like weird takes and kind of like rabbit holes that it just wants to go down so badly.
Yeah. 100%.
So
100%. Like that was, and again, we didn't, a lot of this, we realized the solutions to like, as we were building out this product, right? It's not like we showed up with this perfect blueprint of how all this needed to be built. This is how we've been able to control this experience. The second opinion, it's like a close cousin to the pre and postcards. But if you think about the way our process is designed, you have an AI assistant guiding a user through 5 sections, and we have notes that the AI is writing down to a database, like Callan just described. We're looking for a certain amount of specificity or quality to certain questions or items. And so we found that we actually get a better result when we have a different AI tool evaluate what is happening and determine if we have enough to proceed to the next step or not. And so the state machine, it kind of controls that. It says, hey, I think we're ready for this step. But then this second opinion comes in and says, yeah, I think you're good. Or said, no, you don't, you're not good. This needs to be clarified, and kind of keeps moving that forward, which kind of speaks to the multi-model approach that you see in different solutions, or people recommending have a multi-model approach. But again, it's kind of the same core problem. It's unrealistic to expect that main LLM to maintain all that context and awareness reliably on its own, right? So to have something come in with a more narrow set of principles it's trying to hit and say like, hey, let's grade this. Where are we at? So you would think, maybe you intuitively sometimes, Cal, I think, well, isn't that just introducing the surface area for more chaos versus like more control? I don't know, but it works.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I do think that just the practice of using this, and true in harnesses too, like the practice of using a very, very targeted, context clean third party agent to validate work is extremely useful. Like I just have so many examples of that working really well for me. This is why like the advisor slash command in Claude and things like that have been implemented, is just like to give the main the main orchestrator or the main conversational agent less ability to just kind of cherry pick like assumptions from the orchestrator, and be very neutral, unbiased, and get to be a little bit more binary in its kind of evaluation.
Right.
So the second opinion kind of does that.
Yeah. And that's to get to the simplicity of what the user actually experiences. This is all necessary. Otherwise, because we're trying to create a situation where like a team can come together and do this and have cross-functional synthesis and all these capabilities with all this rich context, but you can't have an AI that's just like spinning in a loop, like drilling a user about an idea and it's like not moving on, or it's asking redundant questions.
Going back to like the question thing, like every question has a level of like on the scale of like binary versus kind of like, don't care. Like there is a scale for every question. And so when you're building something, when a person is building something, you just like we did here, like you have to kind of get it to you have to define a high level goal and low level requirements that fit that goal. And in this case, that's the individual questions, that's the sections and their evaluation, and it's the output, which is the, all 5 produce a usable thing. And they all have to sing together. Otherwise it sounds like, doesn't sound very good.
It sounds like our kids.
I wasn't going to say that.
Screaming in the morning.
I wasn't. I thought you were going to say like recital.
Yeah. This idea here, trust the data, not the pros, builds on what you were saying. So one thing I realized when I first started building this is at the very, very last line of defense in this process is always the user. So we are trying to guide them through a method we believe in that will give them clarity and focus and lead them onto a good path and a good solution idea. And so during this experience, the AI is going to essentially, like a good consultant would do, hey, let me tell you what I heard. So it does that in this experience. But again, this is rendered directly from what's being extracted by the system during the process, not the AI's embedded context. And so what this allows for is it actually empowers the user to have clear control, even though they don't realize it, because ask them a yes, no question, like essentially, is this right? Yes or no? Not exactly what it says, but, and if they say no, they have the opportunity
Confirm, revise.
Yeah. They have very fine grained ability to direct. Like the next step date you had there, I want to change that. Or you didn't quite And so again, that gives us sort of the user's not really directly aware of it. That's not made inherently obvious, but they've got real control over what's going on. And if you've ever worked with AI long enough in a session, or like image generation is a classic example of trying to iterate on something that doesn't have actual structured elements
Mhm.
underneath of it, it can be a real sufferfest for that user. And so we do ask the model, hey, present a summary to the user, but it's instructed go build that in this very specific way from what's been captured so far. Then that allows us to control the session in a really specific way as well. And then sort of our last line of defense in this, and I think if I was ever building any sort of chat based experience, like a help assistant or a chatbot on a website, I think I'd always have this concept now by default, this idea of an escape hatch
Mhm.
to prevent the user from like getting stuck in a loop. We've done so much to minimize the likelihood that this is ever needed, but it's still conceivably possible because AI is weird. It's inference based and it does things. And so the server state knows like, hey, we've just been on this section for too long. So we're gonna trip an escape hatch and we're gonna be able to advance forward from here. This was probably maybe the first safeguard that we built into our system because you would notice that because the LLMs, they just love to go deeper and try and get the user to explore more surface area.
Mhm.
It's like, "Ooh, let's really dig on this problem." And it's like, "No, no, no, you've gathered enough here. Time to move on."
Yeah.
And, so I think this concept was a big unlock for me in my brain.
Yeah, we have some interesting smoke tests that we run that, one is around this one, which is like
Mhm,
kind of a maybe like a difficult user, or we have some that are more like very vague users. We have some that are very technical.
mhm.
We have some that are like very wordy.
Yeah.
All of those examples test for escape hatch in some ways.
Mhm.
Like this is way too much information, or like, or like this user is clearly not able or wanting to answer this question. Move on. Um, like it's not a big deal.
Right.
Let's let's build confidence and trust as we go. We don't need to
Yeah. Yeah.
build the Eiffel Tower today. So yeah, for sure.
I love this little takeaway here. Getting to a reliable experience is really all about the stuff that's not the model.
Hmm.
Like the models we're using in our product, we know they're good models. We're using different ones for different things. They're
Hmm.
awesome. But getting this experience to where we've gotten it is about all the other stuff. What the server does, what the app does, how we pass information between the models. And for us, we're really excited to get this out there because we want to help people and we want to provide a tool that helps them think about AI change in their situation, whatever that might be, and to do that in a way that we're very confident will put you on a good path. Sure, you could fire up ChatGPT or Claude and ask it to help you with stuff, and that's how a lot of people get started. And we just thought there was an opportunity to create something that not only can help one person, but can help a team of people, bring them through a common experience, give them a shared language of how they think about AI, create some opportunity to synthesize what's happened across everything. And it's been really fun to build. And there's been a lot of challenges, but Kellen, anything else you'd want to throw in here, and just in terms of your lessons in the trenches of the final 20% of the build?
No, I think you covered like the mechanical and functional reasons why things are like this.
Hmm.
I do want to say I think a big reason for us to build this thing, not just from like a, economic perspective, but from like a leverage perspective, like being able to help more people as kind of like micro consulting in a sense.
Hmm.
Like this is like how, like obviously we may maybe take some more little bit of a turn here and there on an
Hmm.
individual client basis, but like overall, this is how we would want to work with a client and
Right.
how we work with clients. So like this is meant to like in some ways be able to provide leverage for us to help more
Hmm.
people at, potentially a lower price point people can afford or whatever, but also still allow us to make an impact and provide that value. We're still do consulting and stuff, but like this allows us to like really dial in
Hmm.
our methodology, our value proposition, and all
Hmm.
that kind of fun stuff. Like to as many people and organizations as we can, while it's just being us too. So we don't have like a team of 80 engineers or you know
Mhm.
clients. Maybe we will at some point, but that's not where we're at right now. And even if we did, I think that this would help really solidify clear next steps and a clear thinking around this technology
Right.
that we would do in person.
Yeah.
But now you can do kind of like on your own, self-paced, you can run it multiple times, all that kind of stuff. We're not done, but I think we're really close. And just given like kind of the demos we've done for people, like it's been really exciting to kind of see where this could go and like how much this could help people just kind of eliminate a lot of the chaos in their heads and
Mhm.
minds around what you should do next
Yeah.
and just focus on a few things. So
Yeah. At first, the first couple for me, it's like baseline, you just want the system to work, right? Like, oh, please
mhm.
no bugs, please no
Yeah,
AI
yeah.
freakouts, right? And you work
Mhm.
so hard, and then you know, for me, it's like, okay, you just have to sit there and be quiet because if I explain what's happening or explain what they should say or why that's defeating the purpose, right?
Yeah,
And so just to be there quiet,
that's cool.
let them use it, and they understand what's going on. They're just talking in their language.
Mhm.
They're getting into a creative space with the guided experience. And then for them to get to the end, and this is again why we need all this to work this way to extract the data and communicate with the user in specific ways about specific things. They get this really actionable blueprint and all these assets at the end that they're really excited about. I want to go talk to my boss about this. And I've got something that I could take to Claude Code right now to like get started working on this. And
Yeah.
so for me, it reminds me of like we do BI training, or you'd see someone's face light up when they realize like, oh, I've just kind of had like a breakthrough here. And so,
That's
yeah, that's the
yeah.
leverage thing. That's what we want to be able to do, even though we're
Mhm.
in the room when we're doing like a workshop for a team, for people to have a shared way of thinking about how to approach the new technology. I think there's a lot of power in that for them as well.
100%. Yeah.
So it's been fun, man. Almost there. We got all kinds of goodies we'll be sharing out with folks in the weeks and months ahead. But yeah, if you're building AI with AI in it, I think each of these 7 ideas, there's something to take away and think about
Mhm.
that could potentially help your solution improve and perform better for your users. All right. Well, if you're a fan of what you're tuning into, be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Until next week, we'll see you then.